I don't know why that's not streaming, but it says streaming on here. Um, Sorry, just to start off with, yeah, imposter syndrome in tech is something that I think a lot of people don't realize that they've experienced it, and what forms it can take, really. And I guess the first question is anyone here, and Vicky, if it's okay to start with you, have you experienced imposter syndrome yourself or know anyone in your industry that has experienced it and how it really manifests itself?
I'd definitely say I've experienced it. I'd say like there's just kind of little things that you kind of, it's when you like second guess yourself and you just feel like everyone else knows what they're doing and you just have absolutely no clue. And one day they're going to find out that you don't have a clue what you're doing and be like, why have we been paying her for this long? And yeah, I do. I feel like that quite a lot. And I think it's just something you kind of have to learn to live with, and there are like things you can do to kind of make it feel better, and you just got to like believe in yourself and know that that's not true, that and look at what you've done as well, like step back and look at what you've done and
Yeah,
say I did that. And
I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think it is that doubt, and I think that's probably how it always takes its first form. Is like, wait a sec, am I really doing? Am I going to be found out? Is there something? Because we always have such high expectations of ourselves. Paul, I don't know what your experience of imposter syndrome is in the industry.
Uh, I mean, I experience it all the time, right? I think there's a bit for me where, um, I'm very lucky. I think I'm quite lucky to work where I am, where I do, and I think quite frequently I worry that people think that I know everything about the web, I know everything about Chrome, and I don't, right? And I think there's a bit here of like I work with a lot of people who know way more than me, and I always worry that, oh, like, what are people thinking? Right? And I've been here for 13 years now. I'm all right. I'm doing all right. But it's one of those bits of, I do feel this quite a lot, and I've felt it all my career. Like there's just always a lot of people with a lot more experience.
Mm.
Don't know, they've been through a lot of different things as well on that side. Um, and yeah, I know we're going to talk about it later, but I do know there's a lot of people who do experience this. And um, yeah, I actually, Vicky, I really like the bit where you said a second ago about thinking what you've actually done in the past and going back through. I don't think a lot of people do that reflection and that
Yeah.
introspection. Just like actually, hey, we've done some really cool stuff. It's great. I'm all right. But yeah, I do experience it a lot actually, quite frequently still.
And Sam, thank you for that, by the way, Paul. Sam, what's your experience in an industry? You know, you said a second ago that you've come from another industry as well. So I think when especially you've got career switches, especially as we do on the course, to pick up on Paul's point there as well, it's like there's always somebody that you feel has more experience than you, which can make it almost feel much worse. I don't know how you've experienced in the industry or seen other people affected by it.
Yeah, I think a lot of your audience will be in a similar position to me where they have career switched into tech from another career. And I think it can be quite daunting, especially when you're working with people younger than you that are so far further on in their career because they say went straight into tech from college or university and that's all they've ever done. It's quite easy to feel quite daunted at an older age going into a career from scratch and having to sort of like compare yourself with people younger than you can be quite daunting. I think the thing to remember is that if you've come from another career, you've got so much experience from that career that can be translated. And I think people do forget about soft skills. There are certain skills that you can take from other industries that you possibly would never get just working in tech and never doing anything else. Things like people skills and stuff like that, which you forget how important they are. And I try to make use of those skills and try to teach my peers things that I have experience with, like empathy and mentoring and stuff like that, which is just as important as technical skills. So I think yeah, imposter syndrome in career switches is probably a lot higher than others. But yeah, I think you just got to remember that you've got so much to offer that perhaps your peers don't.
I can't agree with that more. I mean, we had a discussion yesterday, and one of the themes that was coming through from students yesterday was, I'm only going to get judged on my technical skills. The first thing, because some companies genuinely their first hurdle to get an interview right is actually do this technical test. It's not even meeting the person. And I said there are companies that hire on that basis. Most companies, though, the first engagement you have on that interview trail will be they want to meet you. The technical skills they can train. If you've got a base level of proficiency, you can learn the technical skills, but the soft skills and your personal skills are so important in this industry. And I think it's really important that we bring that out and say, at the end of the day, companies are judging you. They are judging you, but they're not judging you constantly. Do you know what I mean? The companies value you. That's probably the better way to describe it. They value you based on a myriad of things that you bring to an organization, and your hard skills are, yes, one of them, but there is so much more that you have to offer, and ultimately your human and interpersonal and soft skills are valued just as much. And you don't have to be an expert in everything. I think that's really, really important. There was a recent YouGov poll that said 60% of the population has experienced imposter syndrome. Now, I think when I look at that, what it says to me is there's 60% of the population that are willing to admit that they've experienced imposter syndrome. Because for me, everyone you speak to, everyone when you do have those conversations has in some form experienced some form of imposter syndrome. But I spend my time speaking to people in technology, and I think that that's a lot higher. Why do you think that in tech it is a lot higher? And if that's okay, Sam, it would be great to stick with you on that. Why do you think in tech it is a lot higher than the general population?
I I think I actually don't think it is. I just think we talk about it more
Okay.
because I actually didn't even hear the term imposter syndrome until I started working in tech. I'd actually never heard that before. And I started thinking back to when I was a hairdresser and like, I actually remember having that feeling, but I just didn't really know how to voice it. And
Yeah.
I didn't like, no one really talked about it. So I think, I honestly think that we just talk about it more in tech because it's just more evident, and it's such a huge, broad industry. Hairdressing is very much like we cut and color hair, and there's lots of ins and outs, but tech is just this massive beast with all these different avenues, and it's impossible to know everything.
Right.
So I think it's more evident in that sense. But I definitely think everyone feels it regardless of their industry. It's just we talk about it a lot in tech.
I completely agree, and I don't think that's a bad thing, by the way. It's like we should talk about it.
Oh, it's a great thing, yeah.
Paul, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't hear it until, it came through, like, definitely through some of the tech angles that I've been working with. I actually saw it more as well when it kind of, I was on Twitter at the time a lot more, and I was actually wondering at the time, it's whether kind of our industry, I think at least on the technical side, we embraced online, and it was a lot more connected than a lot of other kind of industries that I've seen and I've worked in as well. And so I didn't know whether it was kind of, I think everyone experiences it, but maybe, yeah, because we talk about it, just because we're so much more connected than a lot of other kind of roles, I think. I could be wrong with that actually, but yeah, that's how I've looked at it at least.
No, it's fair. I think having that connection though does allow us to, coming back to the earlier point, it allows us to articulate the feelings a lot better, even in a remote industry, right? Because I think we are moving a lot more remote as well, even though we're connected, we're more remote. And one of the things I think that worries me about continuing to be more remote for juniors is being able to have that moment for me where you do show that your true feelings. It happens to me a lot more face to face, and that is a big worry for me going forward with the industry. Is can we remotely articulate our feelings as well of how we're truly feeling? So I do always ask juniors where they can to be more face to face, to have that opportunity. But anyway, that's probably a bit of a sidetrack. But coming back to juniors in boot camps, I think juniors get a lot caught up on having to know all of the syntax. When they're trying to solve a problem, especially with JavaScript, when we move on to sort of framework based, like they must know, and they feel they have to know all of the syntax. Otherwise, they know what they want to do, they can pseudocode it, but then they can't remember the syntax, and they feel that Googling something is not the way you should do it. It's like, no, I should know this, and that creates so much pressure on themselves of there's no way you can know all of the syntax to every framework. It's impossible. But there's that feeling that you have to, and if you don't, like, you're an imposter, and that's where a lot of the imposter syndrome comes from. At what point in your career do you think that you come to terms with the fact that you can't know everything and Googling is acceptable? Because, it has to be, right? Vickie, I know that you've put yourself down to want to talk about this. Do you ever come to terms with being okay with just Googling?
Funnily enough, when I read your question, I said it to my boss. It says, at what point did you come to terms with this? And I was like, still not sure I'm come to terms with this. But no, I think that personally, I didn't kind of come from like an educational background. Like I don't have a degree. And so I did have to kind of learn a lot on the job. And so for me, Google was always like a massive resource that like I was aware was available to me. Especially working kind of in small companies, I didn't have like loads of senior developers that would help me. And I kind of had to find out quite a lot for myself. So I think for me, I found that like Google to be kind of really like necessary. But then I also think that there's kind of an aspect of like in tech, stuff changes like so quickly that if you try and learn everything, you'll never ever manage to learn everything. And I think that feeds back kind of into like imposter syndrome because it's changing so quickly. Like back to your last question about why it's higher in tech, I think possibly it's because things do change so quickly that you always feel like everyone else is keeping up and you're struggling to keep up, whereas I think in reality like people are just kind of learning bits. And yeah, like Google is like the biggest resource out there, and I think I think that when you realize that it's a kind of a key set of skills you learn, and I think one of those skills is Googling as well, and how to Google something and how to like find the right answer to a problem. Because sometimes you'll have a junior who said, I've Googled everything, I can't find it, and then you'll type it into Google and it'll be the first answer, and it's just about knowing like what to type and what. So I do think it's definitely a learning that you have the core skills, and that Google is just a tool in your toolbox to help you kind of solve problems.
It's interesting because what you say there actually is Googling something isn't a weakness, it's a tool that you develop. So actually, you shouldn't see it as, if you're great at Googling to find an answer, really the skill is understanding what the challenge is and what to ask Google to get the response that's going to help.
There's a lot of noise on Google, and it's like understanding, being able to take from what you see on Google and like be able to pick out what is actually relevant to your problem and what isn't relevant, and picking it out and putting it in. Like you could copy and paste Google code off Google all day and it would probably still never work. So you have to have like that understanding of like what to take and what to use. It's definitely a skill.
And Paul, do you still Google? Do you feel that that's a weakness, or do you think that that's a tool in your?
Things are changing, right?
Right.
I mean, maybe one of the things I was going to say, like when I started, I was using Microsoft Developer Network, which came on a bunch of CDs, right? And I always had the reference by hand, right? And so this whole bit of kind of, for me, the fact that Google exists, it's easy access to the index of information, right? And just being able to kind of get that side of things. For me, I've never not just had to look things up. I can't remember the whole dictionary, right? Like the whole way that these things work, right? And so for me, throughout my entire career, I've always had access to kind of some sort of information that just tells me how the systems work, or how they kind of, the syntax and all that type of stuff. And I've always been kind of pretty comfortable with that. I think the bit for me is the harder bit was kind of like, getting on to the change of how, you access this information. And so like recently, one of the things that I've been doing a lot of work around, things like GitHub Copilot. It's just a tool that I never thought I'd actually want to use. And you know what? Every single day I'm using it right now. And it's just, it's game changing for the way that I build software. And I think just that kind of, readiness to adapt and be able to kind of recognize patterns, like they're the useful things, not knowing kind of, I don't know this API. Well, we can look it up. It's fine. Yeah. I feel comfortable with that personally.
And I think there's a really interesting point in Copilot, because on our courses, we actively discourage students from using Copilot in the first instances, because it comes back to what Vickie was saying a second ago. It's actually, you have to understand what the tool you're using is doing before you implement the tool. But when I speak to mid-senior level devs that are implementing it, because they can quickly scan, a piece of code that's repetition code that they've used elsewhere, they know to use it. And I think there's a real lesson there, isn't there, in we all want to deliver the best work we can do. I genuinely believe everyone goes to work to do the best, and that means understanding our inherent limitations of, like you said, you can't remember the whole of the dictionary. It's impossible. I was speaking to a developer, a fairly senior, both in where they sit in a company, but also their age. And he said, I remember a software language came out once that was like 24, 25 different syntaxes you could use. He's like, of course I remembered it all because there was 25 things that you could do. He's like, now there's 20,000 ways of doing something. He's like, I haven't got a clue. It's impossible. And I think we try and put that on ourselves, don't we? Of, no, I must know, I must know, I must know. And yeah, it's just about using the right tools at the right time. Sam, I don't know if you've got anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think one thing that's really important to remember is things like AI, Stack Overflow, and Google, and these tools that we use. They don't just know the answers, they need our input. So we have to give them a certain amount of information to get the right information out. So I think it's, as Vickie said, it is a skill. Like I've literally got on my CV, like Googling. It's you can list it as a skill of like knowing what input to put in to get the right output. These tools, even Copilot has given me some wild answers before because I've not given it enough information. So I think always remember that these tools are helping you, but you're the person giving it the input. So it's definitely a skill, and it's definitely something that grows with us.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm just looking at some of the questions in chat, and please, if you feel that you've got some questions that you'd like to ask the panel, please do. Sarah's asked here, I'm new to the industry, but have come from an industry that is predominantly male. And I've always felt that not seeing people who look like you in your network and your environment can feed imposter syndrome. What would you do to support yourself? Because, one of the things that there was a Tech Nation report recently that said the tech industry is 25% female. You compare that to the census records and it's 50-50 male female, right? On the census records, and it's 12% non-white British, and yet the census is 25% non-white British. So, do you feel that does feed imposter syndrome, and what support networks are available out there to support people in your experience? Vickie, I know this is something that's very close to your heart, so I don't know if we'll start with yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that my first thought would be like kind of seek out other people. Like there are loads of like women in tech networks out there, and there's networks for other kind of minorities in tech as well. And like, yeah, I run the DevelopHER Awards, which is kind of all about creating those role models. And yeah, I love the quote, you can't be what you can't see. And so it's all about getting people who look like me, who look like other minorities, like up on that stage and shouting about them and getting coverage about them, because yeah, there aren't enough kind of women in tech, and I think there should be more. So yeah, I definitely say seek out other people, because they are there. They just, yeah, sometimes not at first glance.
Yeah, I will at one point, if we've got time, get you to tell your story about when you walk past the toilets at a place, because there's a really good story about that, but maybe not for now. Sam, I don't know what your views are on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very passionate about diversity in tech as well, and I'm part of quite a lot of initiatives around that. And I can give a story about when I first joined OVO. I went through about four rounds of interviews with sort of 2 people on each call. So that was sort of 8 senior tech people that I met over the course of my interview process, and not one of them was female. And that kind of raised red flags to me, but it didn't put me off wanting to work at OVO. It actually made me really excited, because I saw a problem and it made me want to fix it. So I think being really proactive in the space, like, yeah, we need more women in tech, but we also need more women to use their voices and to be loud and to actually do something to initiate the change. And it was something I fed back before I even was offered the role at OVO. I fed it back to the recruiter immediately, that it kind of made me concerned that there was no women on my interview. And it's not to say that there aren't women in leadership roles in tech at OVO, but it was just unfortunate that I wasn't exposed to any in my interview process. And I think it's so important to have a diverse tech panel, because that's what you're outwardly advertising to your candidates. So I was super excited because I just wanted to come in and change things. I just wanted to be really disruptive, but a different person might be put off by that experience and might not want to work there because of that. So I think changing things from the inside is a big thing for me, and it's something I would encourage anyone to do.
Yeah, I think that's, we have to be agents of change if we want to do that. And I think the critical thing here is the tech industry for me. We talk about the fact that imposter syndrome is openly talked about. We talk about the fact that, in my opinion, tech understands that it has a diversity and inclusion opportunity to improve, I would call it, because we know that these statistics are real. But I do think it's in a very good place and very open to that change. From my experience personally, and again, I know it's very much my experience, but I'm glad to see that I think we are starting to recognize it and move forward. And I think most organizations, we had a discussion on this previously, and someone was working in the UX UI space, and they said, how can we design products and user experience and user interfaces for everybody if we don't have a team of everybody looking at how we design them? And that to me was one of the critical things, is like everything we build should be representative of the people that we are building it for. For anyone that is feeling that, though, that they don't belong in the space and they don't have what it takes to enter the industry, Paul, what would you say to people that go, I've spent time learning these skills, I kind of know what I'm doing, but I'm still just so overawed by it, and I don't feel like I belong here? What would you say to someone coming into the industry? They're feeling that?
I mean, yeah, a while ago now, but I had a similar kind of a similar feeling, right, when I first started in kind of my journey. And I mean, I did start from a kind of a young age, and I went through uni, and so I was probably had a bit of a leg up as opposed to kind of some other people on that side of things. I think for me, and it's not maybe a satisfying answer for everyone, but I at least started by trying to solve some problems for myself, and also finding a community of people as well. And so like that's what gave me the opportunity to kind of realize that I could get access to this group, like in this community, in this ecosystem as well. I had people around me who were kind of open to giving me a chance and support me as well. I recognize not everyone will be able to get into that space as well. I think the bit for me was I was always passionate about actually building stuff for me first. Maybe that's quite selfish, I don't quite know. But then I also with some of the stuff that I got to build, I found that other people wanted it and other people liked it. And I still remember just trying to get, I couldn't get my first job at all. Right. And I did this whole bit of I had to go and speak to some directors in the different companies and kind of show them my little portfolio of things. And it was just this challenge. But because I'd found people that could give me the loop in, because I had this other little group of people that I'd worked with, and I had all this kind of like small portfolio, that helped me, which I recognize isn't kind of the same process that other people go through. But yeah, that's what I encourage people to do. But it all depends, I think. I'd be interested in what people say as well.
No, I think that, thank you for that, Michael. I think that is the thing. It's like one of the great ways to, we always say, is when you've come out the back of the boot camp, is spend time building something you're passionate about, build up a portfolio, because you're going to learn, you're going to learn to deliver outside of almost the training wheels of being in a boot camp where you're demanded to do it. And I think there's a really interesting insight there of build the stuff that matters to you and make those mistakes almost, you can build in public if you want to make it available on your GitHub and stuff, which I think is a good thing to do as well. But also, find and learn those things as you're entering the industry as well, because you will learn your strengths and weaknesses outside of that. So I think that's a really good point. Okay.
Can I just add on to that as well? I think one of the things that I've found, because I've spoken to quite a few people in boot camps, and because it's definitely not how I experienced it, which was that a lot of people in boot camps are also having to hold down kind of other types of employment and roles at the same time as doing the boot camp. And so I do recognize it's not possible for everyone to kind of get that time to carve out to build your own thing as well. But yeah, it's hard, and I think the people who are going through boot camps are doing amazing work. So,
thank you for that. Vickie, what would you say to anyone that's sort of coming into the industry and saying, I'm not sure if this is for me, I don't think I can do it?
I'd say maybe try and find some form of mentor. It doesn't necessarily have to be like an official mentoring kind of program, but like maybe if you went out to a meetup and there was someone who you just kind of gelled with there, or it could be someone you work with, but not necessarily your manager, or like just somebody in the industry who maybe has got a bit more been there, done it, who can kind of sort of be there and kind of just offer advice, like more like a friendship really, but just someone who, you know, knows how you're feeling and kind of is there as a bit of a sounding board. I think that's kind of quite important, especially if you don't kind of have anyone else in the tech industry around you.
No, great advice. And there's, excuse me, there's definitely mentoring. You know, we've had a few mentioned Code Bar in Norwich, for example. I know you're involved. That's a great community of people. We've got NorDev again in Norfolk, which is, but there's meetup groups as well. You know, for pretty much any flavor of tech that you're interested. You know, go on to Meetup and you can find people. Sam, I realise that you've put down here this is one you'd really like to speak on. So save the best to last. No offence, everyone else. But what's your what would you say to someone who says,
yeah,
what do I
Vickie's
do?
touched on it slightly, but mentoring is so important. Like I quite literally wouldn't be here without some of the mentors I've had along the way. Like surrounding yourself with the right people is just so critical. Like I think it's one of the most important things you should do at the early stages. And meetups are amazing. Just going and meeting other people. There's always meetups going on in whatever city you live in. They're just everywhere. And also, if you're feeling like you're not sure that you should be in this industry, it might just be that you haven't found the thing you're passionate about yet, because there's so much. Like tech is just huge, and there's things that you probably don't even realize are tech, and that, you know, things that are creative. Like I'm really passionate about design, and I love to design, like, you know, front end web. I like to sort of be part of that UI stage of things, which people sometimes think of as a completely separate entity, but it's all part of tech. And I just think just try a little bit of everything. You can go to different meetups or go to like taster sessions, or sometimes there's, you know, things like this, like YouTube live things you can watch, like a little 1 hour taste of different things. Just kind of dip your toe around and see what you like, because there's just so much. And if you're really feeling like you're not enjoying it and it's not sort of for you and you couldn't imagine a career doing this, it might just be that you've just not found that thing that you're passionate about yet. No one knows what they're going to specialize in when they first take that step into tech. It might be something completely different. Like you could start off doing something very data focused and then end up going right over the other side and be in design or front end or something. There's just so much, and having a mentor can help you with that, can help you discover what that is. I honestly couldn't thank enough the mentors I've had along the way. Like definitely wouldn't be here without them. So if you're feeling a bit like that way, you've just got to use your voice and talk about it.
And I agree. You know, I've been very fortunate throughout my whole career of having mentors who, and I don't think you realise how willing people are to give you up time unless, like say, you use your voice and ask for it. But for some people, that's a really difficult thing because they've never had a mentor before and they've never entered into a formal or informal mentor relationship. How would you go about finding a mentor? What would a structure be?
For myself, like I'm quite an outspoken person, so I've never really struggled to ask for help. I'll shout until someone listens. But if you're feeling like you don't really know where to turn or where to go, as Vickie touched upon earlier, there's so many networks out there. You can find them on places like Twitter or LinkedIn. There's loads of different organizations out there with people that are just, you know, so willing to help and be part of it, especially if you're from a diverse group. So there's like women in tech groups and things like that, the very specialist niche areas. If you're feeling a little bit like you're not included, if you're already working at a company that's sort of in the field that if you're going through this bootcamp stage, but you're already placed in a company, just reaching out, you'll be so surprised who would answer for help. Like it can be quite daunting to post in a channel, say on Slack or Teams or something that's got maybe 1,000 people in it. It can be quite daunting to post in that channel. Definitely. But I just feel like the internet is there for you to use. Slack is sort of like this, you know, you're not walking into a room and shouting. It's just, you can post the message and then minimize the window.
Yeah.
Just post it. Just say, hi, I'm like is anybody out there looking to pair up on something, and list your skills and be really specific about what you want. The more information you can give, the better, because then they'll know what you're sort of looking for, and you can get paired up. And some companies, like, you know, OVO do this as well, will run sort of an official mentorship scheme where you can almost apply for it. So it might even be worth speaking to your company at sort of like a HR level and say, is this an initiative we could set up? Could we have an official kind of route that people could go down to apply to be a mentor or a mentee?
And I think that that's a really good point. So I think the other thing for me just to mention is that mentoring can take all shapes and sizes in my experience. You know, mentoring can be as little as posting a code challenge and asking a community to review it. You know, you're still getting mentoring support, and it could be informal discussions with someone that you meet at a meetup group, and the next time you're there, you ask a few questions and you get some guidance, all the way up to a formal, we're going to spend an hour a week together, and you're here, how do we get to here? And it's very defined. But I think one of the things about this community and my experience in this community is you're either going to get an answer which helps you move forward, or I think you're going to get a truthful answer that says, I don't know how to help you, but hey, have you tried this? Paul, in your experience, have you had any, you know, even on a daily basis, small interactions that you class as mentoring that we might not think about as mentoring? Sorry, putting you on the spot there a little bit.
I mean, so that's a good question, actually. I sort of maybe pick up on what Samantha mentioned about kind of, you know, one of the things that some companies do, like Google definitely does it, where it has like an official process for kind of being a mentor and people hooking, you know, say hooking up with them, but like, you know, connecting with the people. I actually found that actually pretty useful as well. Like one of the things that I found, at least in Google, is they do encourage people to ask questions, ask for help, and, you know, find someone kind of through the whole career development side of things. I've been at Google quite a while now. I don't quite know whether it's spread out across the industry, but you know, I think if it doesn't exist, you know, hopefully we'll start to kind of get things going there. For me, I don't know whether I can answer your question properly, because like a lot of my job is to be there and answer questions for people. So maybe we do it kind of as part of the role. But I do. I have a thing on my blog which is kind of like people can just schedule time with me, and I've got maybe, was it like 4 hours, 5 hours a week of just like open time for people to kind of like connect. I think as a manager across the group as well, that's one of the things that I try and do with my team as well, is just like be open and available for people to ask questions, because I do feel like people are, I don't know whether it's the same as imposter syndrome, but like people are scared to ask, right? And they're kind of, I don't know whether I can ask these people, I don't know whether they can take up their time. And like one of the things that I try and do is just make sure that there is time available for people, so that it's encouraged for people to kind of come out and you know connect with me, speak to me. I don't really mind. I don't, whether it's external, whether it's internal, any question's fine. Yeah, so I don't think it actually necessarily answers your question.
I think it does. I think it does really reinforce the fact that again, mentoring and I guess we as an organisation, we have something we call a culture of inquiry, and what we mean by a culture of inquiry is if you're ever doing something or asked to do something, or we're even considering something, and you have, for some reason, you don't understand why, run with that culture of inquiry. Always ask why. You know, there's this whole process in management about the 5 why theory of why we're truly doing something, but it can be very difficult when you first come into the industry to ask those whys, because we get it all the time when I say to students, hey, there's no such thing as a silly question. If you're thinking it, I can guarantee you there's another 3 people in the room that are thinking it that don't use their voice to ask that question and understand the why. So for those that are able to and do feel comfortable in doing it, I think especially in group settings, having that ability to ask the question, you're not just supporting yourself, but you're supporting others in the room as well. And learning to be able to ask those questions is a real skill set. But when you have imposter syndrome, you would think to yourself, oh, that's a silly question to ask. There's no such thing as a silly question, honestly, because the amount of times, sometimes I'll even ask a question that I think I know the answer to, just to get it re-explained for both the room and, to be honest, because it's like, once I have that confidence that I know and I've asked the question, we can move on and move beyond it. And I think that that's something that when imposter syndrome and that thought that am I asking a silly question takes hold, be assured that other people are probably thinking that, and I think that's super, super important. This is a question for everyone, and I'll start with Vickie, if that's okay. What more do you think we can do as we progress into our careers to support new entrants into the community? Because I think the hardest part of getting into tech is always starting. Like, what more can we do to support more people getting into the industry?
So I think that there's kind of a few kind of different sort of ways of looking at it. So in terms of actually kind of getting people into the industry, like the things you guys are doing with your boot camps, they're absolutely amazing. It does really give people that opportunity to kind of change career, and with some of the funding in place, it means that they can actually do that, which they probably wouldn't have thought was possible before because they have like sort of bills to pay and things like that. But from kind of more of a, once they've kind of into the, like they've maybe done a boot camp and they've got like a junior development role, like I've always been really keen as a senior developer to, like, someone said, be the senior developer that you wish you'd had, and like that stuck with me. So there's a couple of senior developers who I can think of, who I won't name, who I've found like really like knocked my confidence when I was a junior and made me feel like I didn't have a clue what I was doing. And it was always, oh, just give it to me, I'll look at it, I haven't got time to deal with you. And like they'd never explain like how they'd fix it, but they wouldn't be like a learning opportunity from it. So I think like with my juniors, I definitely kind of take the time to kind of step through it with them, and like me taking it off to do it on my own will really be like a last resort if I can't sort of come to the solution with them. And then even then I'll want to make sure I kind of give it back to them and then go through it and check that they've understood, and like that we've kind of both sort of, they've definitely learned from it, and so like they wouldn't be there again. So I think as well, like it makes them feel as well, like often it's something really silly, it's like there's like a missing like bracket or something, and like it's taken me 3 hours to find that as well as them. Do you know what I mean? So I think that sometimes that just boosts their confidence a little bit more, that like it just helps them understand that sometimes it's a really, like, the worst problems are generally the stupidest ones, that this solution is really simple for.
I just really want to pick out when you said that it took you 3 hours to find a missing bracket. There was knowing smiles around the entire group. It's like, it doesn't matter how long you've been doing it, it still happens all the time. Really, really great answer there, Vickie. And Paul, what do you think as well that we could do more as we progress more people into the industry?
I definitely think I would love to see more people telling people that they're open to help, right, as well, for sure. I think there's a bit here of, but for me at least anyway, is it was, especially as we're thinking about kind of imposter syndrome, is, I know actually Samantha, maybe you mentioned about the kind of finding a mentor and everything, and it's like one of the biggest hurdles I even thought about was I didn't even know what a mentor was, right, or who might be one. And I think, especially if there's more kind of people who have been around the industry, being open about your openness to help, I think would actually be a really good step. I wish there was more of that, actually. So yeah, I think that's maybe one thing.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair point, isn't it? I think it's when we're asked, we realise our opportunity and willingness to help, but being more open about, hey, I am here to help, is something that we can do more of, especially as more senior individuals. So I'm going to open it up to individuals on chat. If you've got any questions about maybe how you're feeling, about any questions for the panel about how they felt when they first came into the industry, or specific, please ask them in chat now. Whilst the group are looking to do that, what would be your one piece of advice for people coming into the industry that maybe are feeling like they've got imposter syndrome, or just advice for any new entrants, coming into tech anyway? What would you say to them? What do you wish you could have told yourself as a junior as you were coming into the industry, whether that was recently or not? Sorry to put everyone on the spot with that, but Vickie, I'm going to start with you because you're the right of our screen. What would you have said to yourself as a junior?
I think that I would have said that everyone feels the same, that you're not the only person who's feeling like that. I mean, yeah, I'd say that I didn't hear the term imposter syndrome for probably, I don't know, maybe until maybe the third year of my career. And I feel like it really, like Samantha was saying earlier, really ticked like, oh, that's how I've been feeling. And like to say that like 60% of people in tech are feeling like that. I think there's some people who hide it really, really, really well. But underneath they probably are feeling the same. And so I think, yeah, it's just like, yeah, just being brave enough to like stick with what you think and fight your corner. And like, yeah, everyone else will probably then be like, oh no, I feel like I don't know what I'm doing, because she's really confident and she's saying what she thinks and she must know everything. So yeah, it's just like, yeah, trust yourself. And yeah.
Thank you. Paul, what would you say to yourself going in as a junior? And maybe it's not even about imposter syndrome. Maybe it's just like, hey, do this one thing.
No, I think there was a comment earlier about kind of I think finding like what you like in an area that you like. I when I started, I wanted to be a games developer, and one, I found that it wasn't my skill set, and also I didn't actually enjoy it that much. And then one of the things I did enjoy actually was, I found a community and then starting to help other people kind of, build software. It was enterprise software of all things, but like I really enjoyed kind of working in that space. But I also found a really nice community as well that would just kind of support me, and I could support other people. And like that was one of those things where it was like that was a big change for me. And I actually really liked the comment earlier about kind of finding that thing that you like, because it was a big change for me on my side.
Thank you. And Samantha, what would you have said to yourself coming into the industry? What piece of advice would you have given yourself?
Just, I think things that have already been said, but just to reiterate, I guess, just use your voice. Like, you have to be your own cheerleader. You just have to sort of big yourself up and celebrate every little win that you get. And I think if you, one bit of advice that I always say to my juniors is, if you're ever feeling like you just like don't know anything or you're not that good, just send a photo of your screen with your VS Code open to your mum, and you'll feel so much better, because she'll be like,
right.
What's that?
Right. That's so true. That is so true. That is a great piece of advice. We had some people come in actually that are on sort of economic development, and there was some people who had some VS Code screens open. They were like, "What is this?" Because
it could just be a bit of code that's like centering a box, but they'll be like, "Whoa, the Matrix!"
Incredible. I'll let. Thank you so much for that, by the way, as well. That is a great piece of advice. We've got a few questions coming through in the chat now, and I think hands up if you would like to answer this. If you were a career switcher, what kind of coping skills did you have for your first week in role? And how did you introduce your background to new colleagues to keep your confidence up?
I can take that. When I first career switched, I was already working at the company I was at, a company called DAZN, which is sports streaming, and I was working there as like an assistant, like a PA to some senior tech leaders. So I was in the tech industry but not doing tech. And when I career switched into a dev team, I didn't know anything. I didn't know what GitHub was, and I was in a dev team. It was wild, and I just completely learned everything on the job. And during that time, I found other ways to bring value to the team because I couldn't contribute with code. So things I did was like, I would write blogs, I would hold workshops, I would run retros and team days, just any way that I could bring value to the team while I was learning technical skills was like the best thing I could do within my first sort of few months.
Incredible. And again, it comes back to this earlier point, doesn't it, of you are so much more than just the hard skills that you bring. It's everything else that you can wrap around. Yes, you need to deliver some of the hard skills, of course, and over time you will become more competent and really understand the organization you're in as well. Because, thinking about boot camps or even university leavers or anything, it's like you have an approach to how to do software development. You have an approach to using tech, but you don't have the company's approach. So that it doesn't matter what skill level you are, there's always going to be a time when you come into an organization and you are the person that knows the least about the way that they do it. Because guess what? They've been doing it that way in that organization for a while. So I think everyone has that onboarding and on-ramping where it's like you've got to rely on the other things that you bring, and then the rest will fall into place. And that's going to be a natural part of whether you're career switching into tech, going from one company in tech to another company in tech, or even being promoted in an organization. That all of that's going to happen to you through your career. So that's great advice for managing that situation in all of those examples, I think. I'd like to ask about age. I'm 40 and I've applied to do the full stack course, and I'm feeling a bit like, hey, I should have already been in this industry for a long time, but I'm going to be the newbie. What advice would you give me?
I mean, I can take again.
Yeah.
I'm 35, so I'm not far off, and I felt like I've had a 10-year career as a hairdresser. That's quite a long career, so I felt similar, like I'm starting all over again. I'm coming into a company where I'm older than my manager, and I'm being taught and mentored by people younger than me. It could feel quite daunting. I totally empathize with that. It's exactly how I felt, but I very quickly got over it. It really doesn't matter at all. What I love about the tech industry so much is that it is so hugely diverse. It's people from all different backgrounds, different ages, different religions, different countries. I've just met the most amazing people from everywhere in tech, and I just think you'll quite quickly forget about that. It's a very initial feeling, and I definitely had it myself. But yeah, it's something that you'll soon realize doesn't matter at all.
Yeah, Rachel Andrew on my team, she had said something that was, I thought, quite enlightening, which was one of the things we do is we build kind of introductory materials to some parts of web design and web development. And her argument was everyone's new most of the time. Like you're asked to do something, and you're like, I've no clue how to do this. I got to learn either new technologies or new ways and new design patterns and a whole bunch of other things that we've never applied before. And so I think there was just a bit there of I just really like that kind of way of thinking, because I'm pretty old now, like mid-40s, and I'm currently ramping up on machine learning at the moment. I did it maybe 30 years ago or 25 years ago in university and everything, but not touched it ever since. Not my career, not my area of expertise as well. And so like there are a lot of other people who are definitely younger than me who are experts in the field, and I'm trying to learn from them about kind of what do we do, how do we apply this, and it's not like normal programming, like what do we do. And so it was just a nice way of thinking about it as well, because yeah, we're asked to do something and we have to work it all out, and it is new, and there's a lot of things that are new. And so yeah, that's how I tend to think about things for me.
And I think this, yeah, there is a really, that it kind of comes back to that point earlier about you might be in the tech industry for 10 years and you might be on front end, and then you realize that you fall in love with another part of the industry, and guess what? You're 10 years older, you've been in tech for 10 years, but that is completely new. Tech is so big, so vast, and changing so much that uneasy, when I think about comfort zones, we always think if you had the small circle in the middle, like that's your comfort zone. And then you take one step outside of it and you're uncomfortable for a while, but then your circle gets bigger and you're comfortable again. And that for me is the tech industry all over. You are going to move into areas of uncomfort, of new experiences. And you don't have to, by the way. You can, if you want to be a front end dev and slowly iterate the frameworks you're using, you can do that. But also you have this opportunity to keep pushing yourself into these news where you're going to be the person in the room on one day who is the least experienced. But when someone comes in the next day, you're one day ahead of them, and that's the constant cycle. So it's going to happen, and that's the beauty of it. If you want to take that route. Does it make sense to get Scrum or other Agile certificates? Do they help when starting out in a dev team, and are they something that you would look for in applicants?
It's not something I thought of at the start. Sorry, Vickie.
There you go.
It's something I learned later down the line. I probably wouldn't have known much about that in my beginning journey. It was later down the line that kind of was introduced to me. I think it's important to understand these methodologies, but it totally varies per company. So the way one company runs might be different to another. So I wouldn't say to sort of like need to specialize in one or the other. Just having an understanding of these things is enough. I wouldn't say that you would need to sort of get a certificate or any kind of official training around it. Just having knowledge of it is I would say sufficient at sort of a beginner level.
And yeah, I mean, I was just kind of going to echo what Sam said, in that, yeah, I think that it's like having that knowledge, or like back to the kind of meetups that I like pushing. I feel like a lot of that knowledge I kind of gained from going out to kind of random meetups about random things, and like that sort of things. Kind of, there's often a lot of talk about kind of agile and stuff like that. I guess it depends what you're actually applying for though. If you have decided you want to be a Scrum Master, then yes, you probably would benefit from kind of going out and getting those qualifications. But if you're still unsure, it's like you might almost be boxing yourself in by like getting those qualifications almost into like one of those roles. If you're not sure, then I'd just keep kind of it open and just learn a bit about it, but not specialize too soon.
No, I fully agree, and I think to Samantha's point there, it is everyone does it their own way. You know, we've written books about how to do agile, and we've written books about how to do waterfall, and yet you go into an organization, it's like, oh yeah, we're agile. But let me tell you what I mean by agile. Like, that's not agile. That's not the agile I was taught last week.
Yeah.
And you can go to a company, and the way that one team does it and another team does it, it's all different. Having a very, top level understanding, which through the boot camp with ticketing, features, epics, etc., you will get that knowledge of roughly how it's done. But for sure, like every company does it their own way. So yeah. I think we've got a few more questions coming in, but just in the interest of time, if it's okay, I'll send out any further questions to the team, and hopefully they'll be able to respond, and we can send that back out. But yeah, this is always one of my favorite discussions, because you never know which way it's going to go, and it's a meandering one. And I think this is just a great opportunity to speak to people who have been in the industry and their experiences, and know that we always say to our students is, yes, there's a framework, but everyone's an individual, and your individual experiences and how you cope and the ways that you will adapt to the industry are going to be different for yourselves. So it's always great to hear from a mixture of people that have their own experience as well. So I just wanted to say, from everyone at Tech Educators and all of our students and schools and career switchers that are watching and considering this, thank you so much for your time today, and amazing, and thank you. Thank you, everyone.
So, thank you.
Thanks, James.